So something that kind of got swept under the rug with everything that was happening last week involving Syria and all of that other stuff, and generally just not, reporting on the Trump administration accurately by our media, is that Ben Carson, back in the news. I don't know how many of you saw this. Now, Ben Carson is the director of HUD now. He did join the Trump administration. And they found, according to the latest HUD report, they found $500 billion in fraud and mismanagement at HUD. So Ben Carson's been on for what, a couple months? It hasn't been that long since he's been confirmed. He's on for a couple of months. He's found $500 billion. So here's what we found. The total amount of errors corrected in HUD's notes and consolidated financial statements were $516.4 billion and $3.4 billion, respectively. There are several other unresolved audit matters which restricted our ability to obtain sufficient appropriate evidence to express an opinion. These unresolved audit matters relate to, 1, the Office of General Counsel's refusal to sign the management representation letter, and 2, HUD's improper use of cumulative and first-in, first-out budgetary accounting methods of dispersing community planning and development program funds. 3, the $4.2 billion in non-pooled loan assets from Ginnie Mae's standalone financial statements that we could not audit due to inadequate support. And 4, the improper accounting for certain HUD assets and liabilities. 5, material differences between HUD subledger and general ledger accounts. This audit report contains 11 material weaknesses, 7 significant deficiencies, and 5 instances of non-compliance with applicable laws and regulations. Youch! Basically, what Dr. Ben Carson run into is a government bureaucracy at HUD, which we have known for a long period of time, that is basically a bunch of, it's not fraud. What's the term? It's not warlord. What's the term for those people that rule tribal areas, with an iron fist, but not warlord, not an actual warlord, whatever. So you got a bunch of these chieftains, so to speak, committing fraud and getting rich off of it. Nice, huh? In HUD. So Dr. Ben Carson goes in there. They find over $516 billion in this stuff. And there's still a bunch of other things that they think they might have an issue with, but they can't get anybody to support their investigation or their audit, which of course means leftovers and holdovers from previous regimes are still in there running fraud. Isn't that nice? So there's a whole PDF on all of this. And I'll tell you what, it has been absolutely amazing what has not been reported coming out of the Trump administration. Let's forget whether or not you're pro or anti-death to Assad, okay? Let's just pretend that doesn't happen here. When you're talking about domestic issues and the economy and everything else, the media has gone out of their way to not even cover it. Now, every time there was a somewhat positive jobs report under the Obama administration, you couldn't get away from it. You couldn't. If the unemployment rate ticked down even 0.01, my gosh, it was the best thing that you'd ever heard. This is the greatest economy ever. 15 paragraphs buried down. Oh, by the way, things still suck. But there has been tremendous progress just in the past, 6 months or so after the election was over that just is not getting reported and not being covered at all. And again, part of that is you don't want to do this. So this is a story that's one positive of the Trump administration. We found $516 billion in fraud that was just sitting here. There's probably a lot more, but these holdovers from previous regimes won't let us continue our investigation. They're not giving us any support. They're basically stonewalling us. There have been reports of stonewalling with the IRS, with Federal Bureau of Investigation, on various other things related to certain investigations on all of this. So it's a positive story for the Trump administration that they found this, that they're trying to fix it. It's also a negative. This is where the media, it's a twofer. It's a negative indictment of previous administrations, which, of course, we have 8 years of Obama. I'm sure this goes back to before Obama because we've been talking about HUD for the entire 12 years that I have been on radio being rife with fraud, okay? And there really hasn't been anybody to fix it. So this is kind of the first time that we're really getting an indication that, hey, somebody's trying to do something here. And, of course, Ben Carson, one of the things that he campaigned on when he was a candidate was fiscal responsibility. So he came in here and so far has found $516.4 billion with an additional $3.4 billion. And, again, they believe there is a heck of a lot more. I'm going to go over some of the economic numbers and some of the positive stuff, including after this meeting with China here this last week, which happened on the same day that he struck Assad in Syria. And we'll talk about some of that stuff and kind of bring you up to speed on the positive aspects that are happening in the economy coming up on News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel.
Casey Hendrickson, News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel. Your breaking news and weather station.
Hey, good afternoon. Thank you for tuning in. News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel. So far, tons of people via text and everything else, and on Facebook, not happy with United Airlines and that story we opened the program with, removing that doctor from the plane. We have more information about that we'll talk about in the 5 o'clock hour, though. But you can go to facebook.com/Casey the host if you want to continue the discussion there. So we're talking about some of the lesser talked about, lesser discussed issues involving the Trump presidency so far in the first 4 months. And, what was interesting is that somebody had tried taking him to task because he had tweeted out that he had tremendous progress over the past 6 months or whatever. And they're like, he's only been president for 4 months. And it was like, yeah, but the dude has worked extensively when he was just the president-elect. And as I've said before, I've been doing this a while. I have not seen anybody who's an incoming president work more deals than Trump did. Whether you like the guy or not, like what he was doing or not, is irrelevant. He was working. A lot of people go on vacation. They wait till they actually get sworn in. Then they start doing stuff. He was active in working deals and trying to keep companies here and expanding, and he got a lot done. So it was interesting how they'll nitpick and attack him. Before we move on to some of the economic numbers, because, again, we just got done talking about Dr. Ben Carson has uncovered over $516 billion in fraud at HUD just since he came in there. Of course, the media is not covering it. Now, to be somewhat fair, Syria happened. Tomahawk missiles happen, which every time there's a Tomahawk missile fired, there's some liberal somewhere that writes an article about how offensive Tomahawk missiles are to Native Americans. And, of course, no Native American is offended by it. And that's happened already. But this is still something that should have come up over the weekend on a regular basis, but it's not being reported, nor have several stories that happened and broke before the Syrian situation happened. Those haven't been covered either. Before I move on to some of those economic numbers, Indiana, which became America's 23rd right-to-work state back in 2012, which we covered here, and I told all of you, who are afraid, again, as somebody who's from a right-to-work state where the unions are very powerful and influential and very active, don't worry. Right to work does not necessarily mean the end to unions. So if you're union, don't panic about it. And there was a fear-mongering campaign that was happening when I first got here, and I was trying to educate and calm people down about it. And it turns out that, hey, here we are about 4.5 years later, and Casey's right. Again, I know, shocked. So Indiana has had a steady increase in manufacturing employment since we became right to work. Before we became right to work, now again, there's the economic issues and everything that were happening at the time too. Things were not doing so well. But since we became right to work, things have steadily improved in the manufacturing sector. So, of course, Vice President Pence is as a part of that. Now you have another report coming out here that President Trump has dramatically cut U.S. trade deficits to China. 4 months in office. This is something that has eluded presidents past, right? Love him or hate him, President Donald Trump is holding true to his word and dramatically reducing the U.S. trade deficit to China. In February, the trade deficit to China fell by a record amount and American exports increased for a third straight month. Guy's been president for 4 months. 3 of those months, he's had increases in U.S. exports, which is good for American jobs, right? Now, this is all according to ABC News. The deficit fell to $43.6 billion, which is 9.6% below January's deficit of $48.2 billion. while imports on Chinese goods fell by $8.6 billion. The overall trade deficit with China narrowed in February to just $23 billion, which is 26.6% below January. He cut the trade deficit to China. He gets some credit, not all. The trade deficit was cut to China by over 26.5% in 1 month. And that's the second month that he was in office. For decades, President Trump has warned of the growing economic threat China has mounted against the United States. I've been telling everybody for a long time, China's taking our jobs, they're taking our money. Be careful, they'll bring us down. You have to know what you're doing. We have nobody that has a clue, President Trump said in social media posts back in 2015. In early January, President Trump met with Chinese business mogul Jack Ma, where the two agreed to create 1 million new U.S. jobs over the next 5 years. Later this week, Chinese President Xi Jinping will meet President Trump in Florida, which, of course, they did the same day that he tomahawked the Syrians. All right. So now, you can't say he tomahawked the Syrians, right? You can say that? Or is that going to trigger somebody? Because they're tomahawk missiles. But I know there's a double meaning there. Something else that happened here. Farmers, listen up. China has now said that they will consider dropping the import ban on American beef. Just like that. So all of this, okay, now I'm 2 stories into this, right? So in 4 months, deficit is dropped. Our trade deficit to China has dropped. Again, 2 different things. Overall deficit, trade deficit. We found over $516 billion in fraud at HUD that Ben Carson, Trump appointee, trying to fix. You've got China open to the prospect of dropping the import ban on American beef, which could be, and let's be honest, American beef is a heck of a lot better than what they have over there. So this is already looking pretty darn good, right? Again, you don't get this. If this were happening under President Obama, this would be the only story you heard consistently every single day. Oh, how great the economy is, yada, yada, yada. All right, so I told you about Indiana manufacturing, so let me tell you about overall United States manufacturing jobs. You ready for this? The United States added 11,000 jobs in manufacturing in March, reaching a total of 12,392,000 people employed in the manufacturing sector, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. This is the greatest number of people employed in manufacturing in the United States since, are you ready? January 2009. I'm just saying. What happened? What happened in January 2009, Producer Tim? Obama was inaugurated. There you go. I know some of that's the economy, folks, but again, we know that there's been a manufacturing surge since Trump won the election. And some of that credit's going to go to Obama because it happened before he was actually sworn in. So the month that President Obama was inaugurated, there was 12,561,000 manufacturing jobs. So this is the most since that month, because in February 2009, the month after he was inaugurated, they dropped down to 12,380,000. So this, again, credit goes to whoever's commander-in-chief at the time, right? That's what we're told over the past 8 years. No, credit goes to the guy that was in office. Unless you can blame them for something bad, then it was all the previous guy's fault. Now, I'm not done yet. I am not done. The number of employed Americans increased. Are you ready for this? 472,000. It increased 472,000 people in March. March. So there's 153 million people that are now employed, okay? This is the second straight monthly record. How many months has he been president again, Producer Tim? 4. So Trump's been president for 4 months. 2 of those months have been record job creators. Most manufacturing jobs since Obama took office. 472,000 jobs created just in March. Now, again, these will be revised. Usually they're revised down, okay? Almost always revised down. Same formula that happened last time happens this time until proven otherwise. That's just how it always works. So anyway, 153 million people total employed in March, setting a second straight monthly record, and the number of unemployed persons dropped by 326,000 down to 7.2 million. Okay, that's all in March. Now, again, being unemployed, that still doesn't take in the full number. Okay, that brought the nation's unemployment rate down 0.2 of a point to 4.5%, which is not the true unemployment number. It's about double that total. Always is. The Labor Department's Bureau of Labor Statistics said the labor force participation rate remained flat at 63% in March, and the number of Americans not in the labor force increased slightly to 94,213,000, which is up 23,000 from February's number. Okay, so that's still somewhat bad. Some of that is retired, some of that's disabled, but overwhelmingly over the past 8 years, what we have seen is the labor participation rate is overwhelmingly influenced by able-bodied people between the working age of 20 and 50, something like that, whatever their category is. Don't quote me on the exact age, but people will tell you, oh, no, the only reason labor force participation rate is so bad is because people are retiring. That's not true. The biggest demographic in the participation rate that has been negatively impacted over the past decade or so has been able-bodied working-age people. Okay, so until that changes, that is still a problem. So there has been a lot of economic progress that has been happening since he was elected, even before he was inaugurated. And the reason for that is that he is seen as pro-business. There was a lot of businesses that were holding on to money that were waiting to expand, but they wanted a pro-business individual to win the presidency. He did that, and we saw a surge in job opportunities almost immediately. Got more coming up. 95.3 MNC.
WTRC-FM and HD1, Niles, South Bend, Elkhart. News Talk 95.3, Michiana's news channel.